The blood-red sunset spilled over the rugged peaks of the Ruby Mountains as Prudence Sullivan stared down the dusty main road of Elko, Nevada territory, her heart heavy with a promise she could no longer believe. It was 1873, and 3 seasons had passed since Michael Donovan had kissed her goodbye, vowing to return with enough gold to build them a proper life. "He'll come back for me," Prudence whispered, more to convince herself than the weathered cowboy sitting on the porch beside her. Her fingers twisted the frayed edges of the letter she'd received 4 months ago, the last word from the man she'd pledged to marry. Brock Mackenzie removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair as he wiped sweat from his brow. His eyes, the color of faded denim, met hers with an unspoken truth. "Then he'll meet a man ready to end it," Brock finally said, his voice low and steady as the distant rumble of thunder. "No man abandons a woman like you without answering for it." Prudence turned to him, 26 years of pride stiffening her spine. "I don't need anyone fighting my battles, Mr. Mackenzie." "Never said you did, Miss Sullivan," Brock replied, replacing his hat. "But some promises need to be kept, or accounted for." The wind picked up, carrying dust and whispers of a coming storm across the Nevada landscape. Neither knew then how their lives would intertwine in the months ahead, nor how their words on that porch would echo through gunfire and whispered vows before their story reached its end. Prudence had arrived in Elko 2 years earlier, following her father's death and the loss of their farm in Ohio. With nothing but a small inheritance and her skills as a seamstress, she'd established a modest dress shop that kept her fed and housed. It was there she'd met Michael Donovan, a charming prospector with golden promises on his silver tongue. 6 months of courtship had led to a proposal, and his departure for the silver mines near Virginia City. "Your dress shop is doing well," Brock observed, watching as Prudence folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. "Well enough," she answered, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Mrs. Henderson ordered a wedding dress for her daughter yesterday. Should keep me busy for a fortnight." Brock nodded, the silence between them comfortable despite the weight of their words. He'd arrived in Elko 3 months ago, taking work at the livery stable while occasionally riding as security for the stagecoach. Their acquaintance had begun when Prudence's roof leaked during spring rains, and Brock had offered to repair it for a hot meal instead of payment. "I should get back to work," Prudence said suddenly, rising from her chair. "The Henderson girl is tall for her age. I'll need to adjust my patterns." Brock stood as well, towering over her with his 6'3" frame. "I meant what I said, Miss Sullivan. A man who makes promises to a woman should keep them. Or what, Mr. Mackenzie? You'll hunt Michael down like some vigilante in those dime novels." She shook her head, loose auburn curls catching the dying sunlight. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my disappointments." "Never doubted that for a moment," he replied with the hint of a smile. "But even the strongest souls shouldn't have to bear false promises." As Prudence returned to her shop, she tried to dismiss Brock's words. She'd known men like him before, honorable to a fault, carrying a personal code as surely as they carried their revolvers. Such men were dangerous, not for their violence but for how easily they could make a woman believe in things like justice and faithfulness. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the previous night's threatening storm having passed around the town. Prudence was measuring fabric when the shop bell jangled. She looked up to see Sheriff Thomas Riley, his gray-flecked mustache twitching nervously. "Miss Sullivan," he began, turning his hat in his hands, "I'm afraid I've got some news about Michael Donovan." Prudence's hand stilled on the fabric. "Is he dead, Sheriff?" "No, madam, not that I know of," Riley replied. "But there's been talk. A fellow came through on yesterday's stage who recognized Donovan's name when I mentioned it at the saloon. Says Donovan's been living high in Sacramento for months. Got himself engaged to a banker's daughter. The fabric scissors clattered to the floor, but Prudence didn't move to retrieve them. I see, she said, her voice remarkably steady. Thank you for telling me, Sheriff. There's more, Riley continued reluctantly. The banker's daughter. She's with child. I'm sorry, Prudence. After the sheriff left, Prudence closed the shop early. She walked home in a daze, entering her small house behind the dress shop without lighting a lamp. In the darkness, she finally allowed the tears to come, not for the loss of Michael, she realized, but for the fool she'd been to believe him. She was still sitting in darkness when a soft knock came at her back door. Wiping her eyes, she opened it to find Brock standing there, a covered dish in his hands. Mrs. Wilson at the boarding house said you might not have eaten, he explained, offering the dish. It's just stew. Prudence should have sent him away. Instead, she opened the door wider. Would you like to come in, Mr. Mackenzie? Over bowls of surprisingly good beef stew, Prudence told Brock what she'd learned. His face darkened, but he offered no, I told you so. What will you do now? He asked instead. Continue living, Mr. Mackenzie. What else can one do? She managed a small smile. Besides, I have a wedding dress to finish. Brock, he said quietly. My name is Brock. Brock, she echoed, the single syllable feeling strangely intimate in her small kitchen. I'm Prudence. I know who you are, Prudence Sullivan, he replied, his eyes meeting hers across the table. You're the woman who's going to mend her heart and come out stronger. You sound very certain. I recognize strength when I see it. He gathered their empty bowls, and I should be going. Early start tomorrow. I'm riding shotgun for the Wells Fargo run to Tuscarora. At the door, he paused. That man in Sacramento, he doesn't deserve another thought from you. Yet you seemed ready to confront him just yesterday. Brock's expression grew serious. Some things need to be set right in this world. A man should be honorable or be called to account. After he left, Prudence found herself wondering about Brock Mackenzie, what had shaped his rigid sense of honor, and what storms he'd weathered to develop such quiet certainty. The following weeks brought a rhythm to their friendship. Brock would stop by the shop when in town, sometimes bringing small treasures from his trips, a piece of colorful quartz, a book of poetry he'd found at a trading post, once even a bolt of blue silk that matched her eyes, purchased from a merchant in Tuscarora. I can pay you for this, Prudence protested when he delivered the silk. Consider it payment for the 3 meals you've cooked me, Brock replied with a smile. Besides, a woman who creates beauty should have beautiful things to work with. By midsummer, Prudence realized her heart was healing, not because time had passed, but because Brock Mackenzie had shown her what a real man's integrity looked like. His quiet strength and unfailing kindness had replaced Michael's empty charm in her thoughts. On a scorching July afternoon, Prudence was closing her shop when Brock appeared, his expression unusually tight. Michael Donovan arrived on the afternoon stage, he said without preamble. Prudence felt as if she'd been doused with cold water. Here, in Elko, Brock nodded. He's at the Grand Central Hotel. Word is his California arrangement fell through when the banker discovered some unsavory business dealings. So he's come back thinking I'll still be waiting, Prudence concluded, anger replacing shock. I expect so, Brock agreed. What do you want to do? Nothing tonight, she decided. If Michael Donovan wants to see me, he can come to my shop during business hours like any other customer. Brock studied her face. You're not even curious. About what? Why he lied? Why he betrayed me? She shook her head. No, I know what kind of man he is now. That's enough. The following morning, Prudence opened her shop precisely at 8 o'clock as usual. She'd barely arranged her sewing basket when the bell jangled, and Michael Donovan stepped inside, looking remarkably unchanged, still handsome with his dark hair and easy smile, though perhaps a bit more weathered around the eyes. "Prudence, my darling," he began, stepping forward with arms outstretched. "That's Miss Sullivan to you, Mr. Donovan," she replied coldly, remaining behind her counter. "What can I help you with today?" His arms dropped. "Don't be like that, Pruddy. I've come back, just like I promised." 15 months later, after becoming engaged to another woman, she raised an eyebrow. "I believe Sheriff Riley mentioned she was expecting your child." Michael's charming facade cracked slightly. "Rumors and misunderstandings. The child wasn't mine. That's why I left. I won't be trapped by another man's responsibilities." "How noble of you," Prudence replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Now, if you don't have any business here—" "Of course I have business here. I've come back for you," Michael insisted, moving closer to the counter. "We had plans, Pruddy. I still have those plans." "I don't," she stated firmly. "Please leave my shop." Michael's face darkened. "Is there someone else? That cowboy I've seen watching your place?" "My relationships are no longer your concern," Prudence said. "Good day, Mr. Donovan." Instead of leaving, Michael circled the counter, backing Prudence against her shelves of fabric. "You're mine, Pruddy. I claimed you first." "I'm not a parcel of land to be claimed," she retorted, though fear fluttered in her chest at his aggressive stance. The bell above the door jangled again. "Everything all right, Miss Sullivan?" Brock's deep voice filled the shop. Michael whirled around. "This is a private conversation." Brock didn't move from the doorway, his tall frame effectively blocking the exit. "Doesn't look private to me. Looks like a lady asking a man to leave her establishment." "This is between me and my fiancé," Michael snapped. "Former fiancé," Prudence corrected, moving out from behind the counter. "And yes, Mr. Mackenzie, I was just asking Mr. Donovan to leave." "Then I suggest you do so," Brock said to Michael, his voice level but with an unmistakable edge of steel. "Now." For a tense moment, the three stood in a tableau of unspoken threats and defiance. Then Michael straightened his vest and forced a laugh. "I see how it is," he said bitterly. "Didn't take you long to find a replacement, did it, Pruddy?" "That's enough," Brock warned. Michael stepped toward the door but paused beside Brock. "This isn't over," he muttered. "She's worth too much to me." "Then you should have valued her properly the first time," Brock replied quietly. After Michael left, Prudence released a shaky breath. "Thank you." Brock crossed to her, his eyes searching her face. "Did he hurt you?" "No, just my pride." She attempted a smile. "I handled that poorly." "You handled it fine," Brock disagreed. "He's the one who can't accept that his actions have consequences." Prudence sat heavily on a nearby stool. "He says he's not leaving Elko." "Elko's a free town. He can stay if he wants." Brock's expression was unreadable. "Question is, what do you want?" "I want him gone," she admitted. "But I also don't want any trouble." "Some trouble finds you whether you want it or not," Brock said. "I'll keep an eye out. In the meantime, maybe don't walk home alone after dark." That evening, Prudence worked late completing Mrs. Henderson's daughter's wedding dress. When she finally locked up, she found Brock waiting outside. "You didn't have to do this," she said as they walked toward her house. "I know," he replied simply. At her door, she hesitated. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Inside, as Prudence prepared the coffee, Brock studied the small, neat home she'd created for herself. Books lined a small shelf, and colorful quilts brightened the sparse furniture. A half-finished embroidery piece sat in a hoop near her rocking chair. "You've made a good life here," he observed. "I have," she agreed, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. "It may not be grand, but it's mine." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Brock spoke again. "I should tell you something about Michael Donovan." Prudence tensed. What is it? I asked around after he arrived yesterday. He's broke, Prudence. Whatever money he made in the mines, he's lost it. And he's got debts in Sacramento, gambling debts, serious ones. And you think he's come back to me because? Because you own property now, your shop, this house. You're established, respected. Brock met her eyes directly. You're a solution to his problems. The revelation shouldn't have hurt, but it did. I see. I'm sorry, Brock said gently. I thought you should know what you're dealing with. Prudence nodded, processing this new information. Thank you for telling me and for walking me home. When Brock rose to leave, Prudence impulsively caught his hand. Why do you care so much, Brock, about what happens to me? He looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. Because from the moment I arrived in Elko and saw you working in your shop head high despite your heartbreak, I knew you were someone worth caring about. The simple honesty of his answer left her speechless. Good night, Prudence, he said softly, releasing her hand and stepping out into the night. Prudence slept poorly, her dreams haunted by Michael's angry face and Brock's steady presence. Morning brought no relief as she discovered someone had thrown a rock through her shop window during the night. Attached to it was a note. Reconsider, Pruddy. Sheriff Riley was sympathetic, but unhelpful. No proof it was Donovan, he pointed out. Could have been local boys causing mischief. It wasn't, Prudence insisted, showing him the note. Still, not much I can do without catching him in the act, Riley said apologetically. I'll have a word with him, though. Brock arrived as the sheriff was leaving, taking in the broken glass and Prudence's tight expression. Donovan, she nodded, showing him the note, his jaw clenched. Sheriff going to handle it, he'll have a word, Prudence said bitterly. Not much else he can do, apparently. There are other kinds of justice in the West, Brock muttered. No, Prudence said firmly. Whatever you're thinking, stop. I won't have violence on my behalf. Brock helped her clean up the glass and board the window until the glazier could replace it. As they worked, a plan formed in Prudence's mind. I need your help with something, she told Brock, but you have to promise to follow my lead. He looked skeptical but nodded. What do you need? I need you to accompany me to the Independence Day social on Saturday, she said. As my escort. Brock's eyebrows rose in surprise. You want to make Donovan jealous? I want to make a public statement, Prudence corrected. That I've moved forward, that I'm not available to him or his schemes. That's your plan. Show up at a dance with another man. It's a start, she said. Will you help me or not? Brock studied her for a long moment, on one condition. Which is, this isn't just for show, he said seriously. When I escort a woman to a social, I don't pretend. If we do this, it's real, at least for me. Prudence felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. I wouldn't ask if I didn't mean it. The Independence Day social was Elko's biggest celebration of the summer. The entire town gathered in the town square for food, music, and dancing under paper lanterns strung between the buildings. Prudence spent hours on a new dress for the occasion, a deep blue creation made from the silk Brock had given her, with delicate embroidery at the neckline and cuffs. When Brock arrived to escort her, his usual trail clothes had been replaced by a clean black suit, white shirt, and string tie. His hat was new and he'd trimmed his beard. The transformation was striking. You look beautiful, he said simply, his eyes appreciative but respectful. Thank you, she replied. You clean up rather well yourself. The social was in full swing when they arrived. Heads turned as they entered together, and whispers followed them across the square. Prudence spotted Michael immediately, standing near the makeshift bar with several other men. His eyes narrowed when he saw her on Brock's arm. He's seen us, she murmured. Good, Brock replied, placing his hand over hers where it rested on his arm. Now may I have this dance? As Brock led her onto the wooden dance floor, Prudence realized she'd never been this close to him before. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and he moved with surprising grace for such a large man. "Where did a cowboy learn to dance like this?" she asked as he guided her through a waltz. "My mother believed every gentleman should know how to waltz," he answered with a small smile. "She was determined I'd be a gentleman, despite growing up on a Texas ranch." "Tell me more about your family," Prudence encouraged, genuinely interested. As they danced, Brock told her about his childhood on a struggling cattle ranch outside of Austin, his father's death from pneumonia when Brock was 16, and his years working as a ranch hand before the war. He'd fought for the Union despite being from Texas, a decision that had cost him his relationship with his brother. "After the war, there wasn't much left for me in Texas," he explained. "So I started drifting west. Worked cattle drives, served as a deputy in Colorado for a while, then started riding security for the stage lines." "What brought you to Elko?" she asked. His eyes met hers. "Chance at first. Then I found reasons to stay." The moment was interrupted by Michael Donovan, who appeared beside them, clearly intoxicated and belligerent. "May I cut in?" he demanded more than asked. "No," Prudence said firmly. "I'm dancing with my escort." Michael's face flushed with anger. "So it's true. You've taken up with this saddle tramp." "Watch yourself, Donovan," Brock warned quietly. "Or what?" Michael challenged, voice rising. "You'll shoot me for speaking the truth." "She was mine first." People nearby stopped dancing to watch the confrontation. Prudence felt her face burning with embarrassment. "I was never yours," she said clearly. "And I'm not property to be claimed or fought over. Now please leave us alone." "You heard the lady," Brock added. "Walk away while you can." Instead, Michael lunged forward, grabbing Prudence's arm and trying to pull her away from Brock. "We need to talk, Pruddy. Alone." Brock's reaction was swift. He broke Michael's grip on Prudence's arm and stepped between them, one hand raised in warning. "Don't touch her again." "Or what?" Michael taunted, swaying slightly. "Or I'll teach you what happens to men who don't respect a lady's wishes," Brock replied evenly. "Stop it, both of you," Prudence hissed. "Everyone's watching." Indeed, a circle had formed around them, the townsfolk eagerly anticipating a fight. Sheriff Riley pushed through the crowd. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Just a misunderstanding, Sheriff," Brock said, not taking his eyes off Michael. "Misunderstanding," Michael laughed bitterly. "This man stole my fiancé." "Former fiancé," Prudence corrected again. "And no one stole me. I made my own choice." The sheriff looked between the three of them. "Take it elsewhere or cool it down. This is a celebration, not a saloon brawl." Michael's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over," he muttered before stalking away toward the bar. "You all right?" Brock asked Prudence once Michael had gone. "Yes," she said, though her arm ached where Michael had grabbed her. "But perhaps we should leave. I've made my point." Brock nodded, offering his arm again. As they walked back toward Prudence's house, the tension gradually eased from her shoulders. The night air was warm and stars dusted the clear Nevada sky. "I'm sorry the evening was spoiled," Brock said as they approached her door. "It wasn't all spoiled," Prudence replied. "The dancing was quite nice." In the lantern light beside her door, Brock's face was all plains and shadows. "Prudence, I need to tell you something." "Yes." Donovan's not just broke, he's desperate. Men with gambling debts like his don't just walk away when they're refused. You need to be careful, Prudence sighed. "Do you think he'll cause more trouble?" "I know he will," Brock said grimly. "Men like him always do." His prediction proved accurate the very next day. Prudence arrived at her shop to find the new window smashed again, and inside, her bolts of fabric had been slashed and scattered across the floor. Spools of thread and ribbons had been trampled, and her sewing machine overturned. Sheriff Riley surveyed the damage with a frown. Still no proof it was Donovan. Who else would do this? Prudence cried, gesturing at the destruction. I understand your frustration, Miss Sullivan, but I need evidence to act, Riley insisted. I'll question Donovan, see if anyone saw him near here last night. After the sheriff left, Prudence sat amid the ruins of her livelihood and allowed herself to cry. Everything she'd built, destroyed in a night of petty revenge. The shop bell jangled and she looked up to see Brock standing in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. Donovan, he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Prudence nodded, wiping away tears. Sheriff says there's no proof. Brock knelt beside her, gently taking her hands. This ends now. What are you going to do? She asked, suddenly afraid of the cold determination in his eyes. What should have been done the day he returned, Brock replied. I'm going to make sure Michael Donovan understands that actions have consequences. Brock, no, Prudence grabbed his arm. I don't want violence. Sometimes it's the only language men like him understand, Brock said grimly. Please, she insisted. There has to be another way. Brock was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. All right, we'll try it your way first. Together they cleaned up the shop as best they could. Several of the town's women, hearing of the vandalism, came to help, bringing replacement thread and offering to assist with mending the slashed fabrics that could be salvaged. This is what community looks like, Brock observed as Mrs. Peterson organized a sewing circle to repair what could be saved. Not what Donovan did. By evening, the shop was functional again, though Prudence had lost nearly half her inventory. As she was closing up, Sheriff Riley returned. Found your proof, he said without preamble. Donovan was seen leaving the alley behind your shop around midnight. Got him locked up for destruction of property. Relief flooded through Prudence. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet, Riley warned. I can only hold him for a few days without a trial. Judge won't be through for another month. What happens then? Brock asked. He pays a fine, most likely, Riley shrugged. Maybe a few weeks in jail if the judge is feeling stern. That's all, Prudence asked incredulously. For destroying my livelihood, law's the law, Miss Sullivan. Riley tipped his hat. Best I could do. After the sheriff left, Brock escorted Prudence home as had become their custom. At her door, she turned to him. Stay for supper, she said. Please, I don't want to be alone right now. Over a simple meal of beans and cornbread, they discussed what to do about Michael Donovan. He'll be back as soon as he's released, Prudence said worriedly. And next time might be worse. Then we need to make sure there is no next time, Brock replied. I've been thinking about what you said about finding another way. And Donovan came back because he needs money, right? What if we give him what he wants? Prudence stared at him. You want to pay him off? Not exactly, Brock said. I want to offer him a way out of Elko that serves his interests better than staying to harass you. The next morning they visited Michael in the jail. He sneered when he saw them approaching his cell. Come to gloat? He asked bitterly. We've come with a proposition, Brock replied evenly. One that benefits everyone. Michael's interest was piqued despite himself. I'm listening. Brock laid out their offer. Enough money for Michael to settle his most pressing gambling debts and purchase passage to San Francisco, where silver discoveries in the Comstock lode were drawing investors. In exchange, he would leave Elko immediately and never return. Why would you do this? Michael asked suspiciously. Because Prudence deserves peace, Brock answered. And because a man with your talents could do well in San Francisco if given a fresh start. The flattery worked. Michael considered the offer, eyes calculating. How much money? Brock named a figure that made Prudence wince. It represented most of her savings, but she nodded in agreement. We'll have the money and a stagecoach ticket waiting when you're released, Brock continued. Provided you sign a legal document agreeing to the terms. And if I refuse, Michael challenged. Brock's expression hardened. Then you'll discover that Sheriff Riley isn't the only man in Elko who believes in justice. The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, Michael nodded. I'll take your deal. 3 days later, Michael Donovan boarded the westbound stage with the agreed-upon sum and a signed document promising never to return to Elko. Prudence watched the coach disappear down the road with mixed emotions. You think he'll keep his word? She asked Brock, who stood beside her. I think he knows what will happen if he doesn't, Brock replied. Besides, San Francisco offers more opportunities for a man like him than Elko ever could. As summer faded into autumn, Prudence slowly rebuilt her inventory with help from Brock, who escorted supply wagons from Reno specifically to bring her new fabrics and notions. Their relationship deepened with each passing week, moving from friendship to something more profound. One crisp October evening, Brock invited Prudence for a ride outside of town. They followed the Humboldt River as it wound through golden cottonwoods, stopping at a bluff overlooking the valley. I've been thinking, Brock said as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of rose and amber, about staying in Elko permanently. Prudence's heart quickened. Oh, Wells Fargo has offered me a position as their local agent, he explained. It would mean no more long rides, regular hours, stability. That sounds like a fine opportunity, she said carefully. Is that what you want? Brock turned to face her fully. What I want is a future with you, Prudence Sullivan, if you'll have me. Joy bubbled up inside her. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'll marry me, he said simply. Not right away if you're not ready, I can wait. But I want you to know that's my intention to build a life with you, right here in Elko. Prudence took his hand, her eyes shining. I don't need to wait, Brock Mackenzie. My answer is yes. They were married in November in a small ceremony at the town's church. Prudence wore a dress of her own design, ivory silk, with lace she'd saved from her mother's wedding gown. Brock wore a new suit, and the expression of a man who couldn't believe his good fortune. As winter settled over the Nevada landscape, they established their home together, Brock moving into Prudence's house, which they expanded with a new bedroom and larger kitchen. Brock's position with Wells Fargo brought stability and respect, while Prudence's dress shop continued to thrive, now expanding into men's tailoring as well. Their first Christmas together, Brock surprised Prudence with a proper sign for her shop. Sullivan and Mackenzie Fine Apparel. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw it. Our name together, she said, touching the painted letters. As it should be, Brock replied, drawing her close. Everything we build now, we build together. Spring brought news that filled their home with even more joy. Prudence was expecting their first child. As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Brock's protectiveness intensified, though he was careful never to stifle her independence. One warm May evening, as they sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Prudence suddenly tensed. What is it? Brock asked, immediately alert. I just remembered something, she said, her hand moving to her rounded belly. It's been exactly 1 year since Michael Donovan returned to Elko. Brock covered her hand with his own. And a year since I promised you he'd never hurt you again. Do you ever wonder what happened to him? Prudence asked. Sometimes, Brock admitted. I asked a Wells Fargo colleague in San Francisco to keep an ear out. Last I heard, Donovan had partnered with an investor in a mining venture near Sacramento. Seems he's found his footing. Prudence nodded, relieved that chapter of her life was truly closed. I'm glad. Not for his sake, but for ours. I wouldn't want his unhappiness shadowing our happiness. That's the difference between you and him, Brock said, kissing her temple. Your heart has always been generous, even to those who didn't deserve it. Their son, James Thomas Mackenzie, was born in late August, a healthy, robust baby with Prudence's auburn hair and Brock's blue eyes. As Prudence held their child while Brock looked on with wonder, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. I once said he'd come back for me, she murmured, looking down at their son. And I said he'd meet a man ready to end it, Brock replied, sitting beside her on the bed. Seems we were both right in a way. Yes, but not how either of us expected, Prudence said with a smile. Life has a way of surprising us. Their family grew in the years that followed. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them 2 years later, followed by another son, William, the year after that. Prudence's dress shop expanded into a proper department store as Elko grew with the railroad's arrival, while Brock eventually became the regional manager for Wells Fargo's operations throughout northeastern Nevada. In the winter of 1885, 12 years after Michael Donovan had first left Elko with promises of return, a stranger arrived on the evening train. The man was well-dressed, but showed signs of illness, his face gaunt. His breathing labored as he made his way to the Mackenzie home on the edge of town. Prudence answered the door, her youngest child balanced on her hip. She didn't recognize the visitor at first, but when he removed his hat, realization dawned. "Michael," she said quietly. "Hello, Pruddy," he replied, his voice raspy. "I know I promised never to return, but I'm dying. Consumption. Doctors say I have months, maybe less. Why come here?" she asked, not unkindly. "To make amends before I go," he said simply. "Is your husband home?" Before she could answer, Brock appeared behind her, his expression wary but not hostile. "Donovan. Mackenzie." Michael nodded respectfully. "I'm not here to cause trouble. May I come in?" Just for a moment. After a hesitation, Brock nodded, taking their young son from Prudence's arms. Inside, seated by the fire, Michael Donovan told his story. The mining venture in Sacramento had eventually succeeded, bringing him wealth but not happiness. He'd married and divorced, gambled and drank, and finally, when the consumption took hold, found himself facing death with many regrets. "I behaved abominably to you, Prudence," he admitted. "And to you, Mackenzie. I came to apologize and to see that you found the happiness I tried to prevent." Brock's arm went around Prudence's shoulders. "We did." Michael nodded, coughing into a handkerchief. "I can see that. You have beautiful children, a good life. What will you do now?" Prudence asked. "Return to San Francisco to settle my affairs," Michael replied. "I've left provisions in my will to repay the money you gave me to leave Elko, with interest." "That's not necessary," Brock began, but Michael raised a hand. "It is to me," he insisted. "Let me die with at least one debt properly paid." After he left, Prudence stood at the window watching as Michael's hired carriage disappeared down the street. "Do you regret it?" Brock asked quietly. "How things turned out?" Prudence turned to him, taking in the sight of their home, the children's toys scattered across the rug, the family portraits on the wall, the life they'd built together. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "Everything that happened led us here. How could I regret that?" Brock gathered her into his arms. "When you said he'd come back for you, I never imagined it would lead to this. And when you said he'd meet a man ready to end it, I never imagined that man would become my husband," Prudence replied with a smile. "Sometimes the ending of one story is just the beginning of a better one." 3 months later, word reached Elko that Michael Donovan had passed away peacefully in San Francisco. True to his word, his will included full repayment of the money Prudence and Brock had given him, along with a letter that simply read, "Thank you for showing me that honor still exists in this world. May your love continue to thrive long after I am gone. Prudence had the letter framed and hung it in their bedroom not as a reminder of Michael, but as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the journey that had brought her and Brock together. As Elko grew into the new century, the Mackenzie family remained at its heart. Their department store became a landmark on the main street, and Brock's work with Wells Fargo helped establish the town as an important commercial center. Their children grew up strong and principled, each following their own path while maintaining the values their parents had instilled. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Brock took Prudence back to the bluff overlooking the valley where he had proposed. Though their hair had silvered and lines of experience marked their faces, the love between them had only deepened with time. "Do you remember what you said to me that day on your porch?" Brock asked as they watched another Nevada sunset paint the mountains gold. "When I first arrived in Elko, I said he'll come back for me," Prudence recalled with a smile. "I was so certain then." "And I said then he'll meet a man ready to end it," Brock added. "I was too certain you deserved better." Prudence leaned against his shoulder, as comfortable in his embrace now as she had been on their wedding day. "We were both right in our own ways. He did come back. And he did meet a man ready to end his claims on you," Brock finished, "though not in the way either of us expected." "Life rarely follows the path we expect," Prudence mused. "That's what makes it an adventure." As the stars began to appear above the Ruby Mountains, Brock took her hand, his touch still sending warmth through her after all these years. "I'd choose this adventure with you 1,000 times over, Prudence Mackenzie." "As would I," she replied softly. 1,000 times and more." They remained on the bluff until the moon rose, two figures silhouetted against the vast Nevada sky, a testament to the love that had begun with a broken promise and a cowboy's protective instinct, but had grown into something neither could have imagined on that fateful day in Elko so many years before. In the decades that followed, their story became part of Elko's folklore, how a seamstress who believed in promises and a cowboy who believed in justice had built a legacy of love that continued through their children, grandchildren, and the town they had helped to build. And though the details sometimes changed in the telling, the heart of the story remained the same. A tale of faith rewarded, honor upheld, and love that had proven stronger than betrayal. For in the end, it wasn't Michael Donovan's return that had shaped their destiny, but the moment Prudence Sullivan and Brock Mackenzie had found in each other the courage to begin again to trust, to hope, and to build a life that neither could have created alone. And in that truth lay the greatest adventure of all.